And thanks and hi everybody. It's so interesting watching the number of participants climb up.
I know, isn't it wonderful?
415. So hello everybody, thank you so much. I've got quite a lot to cover, so I'm going to be really quick. A lot of you know us already, you know me, and might have seen this presentation before. There's some aspects of it that you might have seen before, but I'm going to cover it very quickly. Please interrupt me or come back to it with any questions at the end. So why the need for EIL cover, specialist EIL cover? Well, we believe that a GL policy doesn't really meet the bill, unfortunately, even though iTOO also offers sudden and accidental pollution cover as part of its GL suite, because it places a significant burden of proof on the polluter. It has to prove exact time, place, and circumstance. And almost, from what I've heard speaking to brokers over many years, almost all pollution claims under GL policies are repudiated unless the insurer knows exactly what happened, when and where, which makes it very difficult if it's not very clear, especially if it's gradual pollution. And gradual pollution is really the situation where the insured really isn't clear as to when the pollution commenced, when the leak started, when the drip began, when the tear in the liner commenced, etc. The science doesn't exist to prove how long diesel and petrol have been in the soil. If you see reports claiming that, it's not valid. The science doesn't exist to date petrochemicals in the soil, for example. So it's very difficult to prove whether the pollution commenced before or after an inception date or a retroactive date. And gradual pollution spreads, which makes it much more dilute, which makes it much more difficult and expensive to clean up and remove out of the environment. But also it has interacted with so many more claimants, increasing the likelihood of claims and the volume of such claims. A lot of Africa's infrastructure is old, hasn't benefited from the technology that's taking place around the world. We have poor regulation, or we have poor enforcement. We have excellent laws. And I'll give you an overview of environmental claims and prosecutions at the end of the presentation. Results in the uncertainty of the size of the claim, very active NGO media, pressurizing banks and companies themselves. And whenever, of course, there's a pollution incident, industry is always on the back foot. They're always the bad guys. Foreign investors and banks all have to abide by environmental standards. So there's a lot of pressure in the space. And, you know, you need a local service provider who really understands the situation that your clients are subject to. And the mining sector in South Africa is really uniquely poised for this. You know, this is a picture of informal communities, townships right next to tailing operations. And because there's been an absence of enforcement of town planning in the country, and poor communities obviously want to work closer to their sources of work, we find encroachment of communities who still benefit from full legal protection and the benefits of the NGOs and the media behind them, moving closer and closer to mining areas where they're breathing dust coming off tailings dams, they're drinking water that's been run off from the mine surface. And it really is a ticking time bomb before we see more and more claims coming through of communities being aggrieved around living close to mining areas. So you really do need a specialist EIL policy, I believe. I mean, the main public liability associated with mining anyway is environmental issues. So we believe that our specialist EIL policy is correctly positioned to help any of your mining clients and associated clients in the mining sector. Because remember, you know, when the reinsurers say you can't underwrite coal, it's not just the coal miner. It's the coal transporter, it's the operation of the rail sidings, it's the contractors, it's the suppliers. It really is a very broad exclusion where most reinsurers are going. We fortunately have a treaty that enables us to do coal, and I will talk about that a little bit later as well. But what are the insuring clauses that we are covering in our cover? Just very briefly, let's say there was a release from below a discard dump or a pollution control dam or return water dam, or whatever it is. These vectors or mechanisms or pathways of pollution can occur via groundwater, via surface water, which are the two incidents that we'll show you just now, or by dust outfall on the community. Depends on which mining space you're in. But if you're in gold, for example, as you know, all the tailings dams around Johannesburg, certainly before they were rehabilitated, provide a tremendous health problem to those in the area. So what do we cover? Let's say that there's been a pollution, gets into the cow, next door the farmer's borehole, impacts a wetland, flay, river, etc. So what do we need as insuring clauses? 1, emergency response. 2, legal defense, because obviously the pollution might not originate from your client, but might have been there from previous operators or owners, etc. Business interruption. So this is third party business interruption, property damage, bodily injury, and increased costs of working. We've received a number of inquiries recently around first party business interruption, increased cost of working as a result of pollution, and unfortunately all the reinsurers globally that I'm aware of, especially after the Vale incident in Brazil, where the tailings dam fell across the plant and terminated operations, they basically had to write off an entire mine, resulted in exclusions from almost all the reinsurers around first party BI. Then the big one, the cleanup of contaminated water and soil, all the way from the claimant, all the way back to the source of pollution. We don't pay for betterment repairs or upgrades of the leaking equipment. That's also quite a standard feature in EIL policies. And then something that's really unique, and we're going to talk about a little bit later in the examples I'm going to show, is the ecological restoration. So it's one thing taking the coal slimes or the oil, or the chemicals or the vegetable oil, as we saw a few weeks ago, out of the river. It's another, it's now you're left with a clean but sterile river or flay or wetland. What we offer is one step further, is an ecological restoration where we get the hippies out with their birds and their bees and their chojos and compost and manure, etc., and start to repopulate and revegetate the affected ecological systems. So getting into the flay and the wetland and getting everything growing again. And then lastly, but often understated, is the ongoing monitoring, reporting, public relations, the crisis communications, and regulatory liaison. And again, with the examples, I'll show you how important and ongoing that is. We recently had a potential, or we had a client who had a claim before they came on cover with us around odor and health effects from gaseous emissions, where the client spent 64 million on consultants and lawyers as part of their technical studies and legal defense case and the ongoing communications and public relations. So these things are not cheap to get the right specialists in there for your client and to defend their reputation in the market. This MineSafe product sits alongside a suite of environmental products: our TruckSafe product for hazardous goods in transit, our TankSafe for filling stations, factories, warehouses, SiteSafe for our more complex sites like waste landfills, pipelines, airports, chemical plants, our PropSafe product, doing very well at the moment for any deals where there might be transfer of liability between buyers and sellers and you wish to preserve the selling price of the property, or property developers that want to develop old industrial sites, and there might be latent pollution discoveries on site. And then BankSafe to cover the loan books of any credit provider like banks or DFIs, etc. If you want any further details on any of these policies or products, please let me or Shelley know. But I want to go to an example, or two examples that Shelley mentioned. The first one was on 24th of December 21, so the day before Christmas. Unfortunately, there were some very unpleasant presents delivered to this particular Zululand Anthracite Colliery, which had 66 millimeters of rainfall on the 4 days prior to the failure, and ended up spilling 1,500 cubic meters of coal slurry. So you can see these types of retaining walls here. One of these failed, and liquid coal waste poured into the Black Umfolozi and White Umfolozi river system. They're just upstream of the game park, releasing this toxic mixture into the river systems. They were fortunate in the sense that the heavy rains served to dilute the pollutants as they were washed down the river. But the following is well, here you can see the rainfall over that period. This is the observed weather in December in the Durban area at that time. And you can see very heavy rainfall coming down over that period. And I guess this is one of the messages, is that climate change is here. I don't think there's a person left who is a climate change skeptic. Weather patterns are definitely not the way they used to be. It's showing. I mean, the Durban floods, etc. So it's the number of knock-on effects outside of the big headlines is what we want to show in the mining sector as well, where we think that this is going to play out and increases the need for bespoke pollution insurance solutions that address the real need. This shows you how close they are to the Hluhluwe-Umfolozi Park. Very close, very upstream. The Black Umfolozi is flowing downstream towards the sea, links up with the White, and you can see how close they are to the park. What I want to show you also is that there is generally a history of challenges with these types of operations before there's a pollution incident. That in 2014, they paid a fine for operating 3 mine shafts illegally. In 2018, SABC had complaints from local community about sinkholes. And in 2021, a couple of months before this incident, Umvalo KZN Wildlife, who is the provincial conservation authority in KZN, had a formal objection with the National Water Tribunal over their water use license, which again, I think supports our risk-based underwriting at iTOO. Those of you who've worked with me on environmental complex issues know that we sometimes spend a couple of months doing risk assessments on the insureds prior to coming up with a proposal, a solution, a costing, a structure that meets the client's needs, but also arrives at a price point that is acceptable to the client. I mean, many of these EIL solutions are being done for the first time for your clients. And, you know, we need to come up with fair quotes that take into account all the previous work done by the client, but also is customized according to, you know, their current situations. So it's very important for us to get a sense of a history of the quality of management and how they've managed their facilities, because obviously if we get the data, we get the info, and it shows a very good history of management, that's going to reflect very favorably in the premium. There was a parliamentary inquiry. So, you know, one can ask the question, well, what happened after this incident? Well, there was a parliamentary inquiry in February that the consultants who were monitoring the downstream water showed that actually as a result of the heavy rainfalls, there were no fish kills, etc. That this was obviously 3 months later, that the water system had recovered. I think a lot of it had been flushed out of the system. And it was basically a lucky break that they didn't have any serious environmental damage, mostly because it was diluted by the heavy rains. In this video available online, ZAC, we got this translated from very, very heavy Zulu. My Zulu is not that good, so I had to get it translated. We can monitor their response, how ZAC responded very quickly. Teams were out, berms were put in place. They had, within an hour of the event, senior mine officials on site, surrounding communities immediately notified. But of course, you know, many of these are informal communities. They don't have formal channels to be communicated with. The company subsequently installed another filter press. It was operational by May, costing 14.5 million, and they're currently working on lining 28 of its pollution control dams under supervision by the Department of Water and Sanitation. So you can see, if I was to summarize, and there's very little in the public domain around this. We tried to contact the company, we did a legal search for claims, and this is our estimation of what their internal costs are going to be for these types of incidents. They hired 2 consultants, those are the going rates, to do the ongoing monitoring and reporting, the emergency control response, and compensation to subsistence farmers that we've heard via our contacts is currently being negotiated. So we think an insurable interest of between 9 to 20 million. Fines and penalties will be imposed. Here you can say that the Department of Water Affairs and Sanitation will only look at imposing fines if the company doesn't implement the action plan properly. So it's been closely monitored by the authorities. And then the ongoing 5-year plan of relining the pollution control dams is 90 million. So not only is it an immediate liability to the company anywhere between 10 and 20 million, but they now have to bring forward all their maintenance plans. They've lost control of all of these budgets, and they have, if they don't comply with these, obviously then there's pending fines, penalties and imprisonment looming on the horizon. We looked at this risk, and obviously we don't know who the brokers are to this client. They wouldn't tell us, but if we were to quote on this risk for full cover, 50 million limit, 1 million deductible, we'd be looking at around 250,000 rand per annum to cover for an insurable interest of anywhere up to 20 million. So we think that, EIL cover would have been the right type of solution for this type of client, subject to the risk control and the risk assessment done prior to underwriting. I see the questions are increasing. I'll, if you don't mind, I'll come back to them at the end, if that's okay, Shelley. The second one was 2 months later, on Valentine's Day. Another, not this time a Christmas present, but a Valentine's Day gift, where Thungela Resources, the old Anglo-American, their Ecological Colliery, just southwest of Imalahleni, Witbank, they had a concrete seal at their south shaft failed, and by February 20th, this is the phenomenal number. Within 4 days, so within 6 days, the coal sludge had traveled literally. I mean, this is 64 kilometers as the crow flies, if the crow flies very straight. But, the river itself winds around all the way, coming up to the Loskop Dam. So probably traveling 120, 150 kilometers in total, a much longer journey. And here, unfortunately, this is the Hluhluwe River that it traveled down. Unfortunately, this killed everything along its path. Acid mine drainage is the big enemy of coal mining. It's where oxygen and bacteria react with the sulfates in the coal, producing sulfuric acid, really, which brings all these heavy chemicals, all these heavy metals from coal into solution, which makes them much more mobile and much more toxic to any other invertebrates, fish, insects, etc. So Francois Roux, the head of the aquatic scientist at Mpumalanga Parks and Tourism, I mean, he was just, he said it's 58 kilometers, 100% loss, all fish, all the microinvertebrates, all life is gone, everything is dead. He flew in a helicopter over the Loskop Dam in the mine, and the sight of dead fish floating in the sand in the dam moved him to tears. I'm just going to read what he said here. It was just a total loss. It's basically just fish floating all over the show. I found some hippos and crocs up there. They seem to be fine, but we were very worried about the crocs at present. Ironically, in September last year, they released 24 crocs into the nature reserve at Losko. We thought everything was fine, and then bang, we're back to square one. We need to get all the fish out of the system, because if the fish get poisoned and they get eaten by fish eagles and vultures and crocs and everything else, then obviously that goes up into the next generation, up the hierarchy of the food chain, and things get very complicated. So the knock-on effects are very extensive. Another aquatic scientist who asked not to be named said, "No picture can show what is really going on. I've been working on rivers and in conservation for 43 years, and I've never seen a big spill like this. I started crying when I saw it." So this is the reality of these spills. This just is a close-up of how extensively mined this area is. This is where GPS coordinates put the mine to. This is where the Olifants River really starts. They even call this river here the Steenkoolspruit. Sorry, I got that one wrong. Steenkoolspruit. I mean, you know, the coal spread. If you zoom out, it's quite scary. But just to show you how intensively this area is being mined. This is the area that I showed you just now, was roughly, just trying to find it, roughly like this, that block there. This is zooming out. Here you've got Witbank up here, you've got Kendall here, you've got Oortjies here. This is the border between Gauteng and Mpumalanga. So just to give you an example of where we're looking here. I counted in this area alone, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are all the mines that exist in this area. All the coal mines. On it goes. 28 mines in just that little block. And if we take it even one step bigger, this is the history of the Olifants River, where it starts in the mining areas. All the red dots down here are mining areas. And it travels all the way down and eventually ends up in the Kruger Park over here, and then going into Mozambique. The area that I showed you in the previous map is the extent of that. So you can see how this mining area sits right at the top of the waterfall of one of the most ecologically important and tourism important areas in the country. You have a big spill here going beyond Loskop Dam. You're going to get claims all the way down from all these water users. When I was at Marsh back in 2006, when I sold my consultancy into Marsh and we became Marsh Environmental Services, we were approached at the time by Johannesburg Water, who wanted us to determine a limit of indemnity for their insurance policy. And they were specifically concerned around the Dainfern sewage pipe. Some of you might know the story. And we did a seminal piece of work that calculated the liability from, you know, if the Dainfern sewage pipe failed, and it took 8 weeks to put a replacement fiberglass pipe in, the knock-on effects during that 8-week period of literally shit flying through the sky, excuse the French, but that's the reality, because you can't stop 1.5 million toilets in Northern Joburg flushing. It's all gravity fed, as you know, to the Northern Joburg sewage works. And we modeled the effects of that, you know, the loss of all the greens at the Dainfern golf course, having to relocate all the residents out of Dainfern because you literally had pathogens in the air. People get very, very sick. All the landowners along the Yukske, because basically the Northern Joburg sewage works keeps the Yukske alive, all the way down to Harties. The impacts on the tourism area, and the water quality in the Harties area, and beyond. So all these knock-on effects have to be modeled when we're calculating premium and looking at the potential liabilities and claims. We're only aware of one third-party claim against Thungela at the moment, but I think that they're extremely lucky, and we could very well see a lot more. I mean, this is all very undercover. We had to work on our contacts both within the company as well as within the investment sector, within the mining analysts, the stockbrokers. So, you know, one's really got to dig deep to find out how many claimants there are if one doesn't have that direct information from the claims history. So, but I can tell you now that this mining area down here in the coal belt is really a sitting duck for many knock-on effects and many claimants downstream. So coming back to the example, the company response, I explained that the incident took place. The south shaft, part of an old mine, was last operational in '66. It's part of an old mine that was last operational in '66. Shaft had been sealed since 2019, but of course, out of sight, out of mind. You know, things that are closed, things that are left, decay over time, and the monitoring and inspection is not up to speed. And they immediately reported it to the Department of Water and Sanitation, Department of Minerals, Mineral Resources and Energy, performed sampling, monitoring biodiversity. And they're saying that the pH acidity levels in the Hluhluwe River were acceptable levels the next day. That obviously contradicts the high levels of fish kills which were reported. The Department of Water and Sanitation said they're taking appropriate actions, engagements with the mine and the affected parties. The mine has acknowledged culpability. And the situation right now is that there is a decision to release water from all the dams to flush out the pollution. So quite a large intervention on a provincial level. This will determine how much water will be required for this action and the determination of such water, because obviously the dams contain water and that water has value because it's supplying all the local communities with drinking water, and how that money will be reimbursed by the mine to the department. This is interesting. He said there was no reason for a criminal case to be opened again. A criminal case is only opened as a very last resort when the polluter has not responded in any positive way. So the polluter is, you know, is on watch. As long as they are complying, they're compensating, they're cleaning up, they're spending all that money, doing what the department says they should do. And I'm sure you agree with me. As soon as the department starts telling you what to do, your costs become exponentially higher. Because if they don't, then there's a criminal case waiting against the directors of the company. So we reckon for this, the potential claims here so far that we're aware of, they hired consultants again, much longer area, much more monitoring. We think this could be a much higher figure over time. Short-term rehab, they are desludging all the rivers, they're flushing them out, we know that. And they've got the company confirmed anonymously through our contacts there that there has been one claim from a third party. They don't know yet how much it is. They're expecting to spend between 90 and 100 million going forward. They spent 15 million up to date, which corresponds with our numbers more or less. Again, if we had underwritten this, 350,000 roughly a year for an old complex mine such as this. And again, I mean, these are just non-binding estimates, of course. I mean, they just, until we have all the details on the operations, we can't really put a firm number on that quite. But I wanted to just share with you the orders of magnitude of how cost-effective insurance is even in this type of scenario. Because the feedback that we get on EIL coverage is so expensive, we've never needed it before, we'll put it on our GL cover. And what I'm trying to show in this presentation is that GL cover is not the right cover for these types of things. It doesn't have all the specific clauses for the consequential losses that occur downstream. These are complex, big risks. There's a lot of confused information. There's a lot of downstream claimants. Government gets involved very quickly. They have parliamentary inquiries about it even. So it's, it's really important that mining clients look at this. Again, looking at the public fallout, May 22, just a few months ago, a shareholder activist took them to task in their AGM. Now, in May, we've heard that they are that they have launched a criminal investigation against Thungela. So when I said that previously, that was in February. Now we're at May, and it seems as though the department has taken a different turn. The CEO of Thungela herself said in a media statement, "We are working tirelessly." When a CEO uses the word tirelessly, there's a whole deeper conversation going on with our stakeholders to develop a plan to try and remedy the effects. Right? We've retained the services of scientists. So now you can probably double that insurable interest number that I showed earlier. And now it starts getting really interesting, saying that illegal miners are behind the incident and provided evidence in the form of a presentation. So this is now getting very interesting as to, who's liable. Certainly if there's a criminal investigation behind the mine, the department is holding the directors criminally accountable. So from a regulations update, we're seeing government responding. There are new regulations afoot in terms of tightening up the financial provisions around financial closure and rehabilitation. Final comments have been received on these. They admit that compliance with these laws by mining companies is poor, and implementation of those laws by DMR is also poor. Previously, however, information about financial provisions was deemed as confidential, but now these new regulations are saying that this needs to be more transparently available and more public participation around how mines are preparing to deal with environmental disasters. I just wanted to show you also snapshots from the 2020-2021 National Environmental Compliance and it's not my spelling mistake, enforcement report published by the National Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, the DFFE. And these are a couple of snapshots. These are called Environmental Management Inspectorates, EMIs, who basically have the legal rights to arrest, stop operations, issues fines and penalties on the spot. You can see that they've got over 2,200 of such inspectors. Sorry, a total number registered 3,584. This is the grade 5s. People who can visit any of your client sites and perform an inspection. We have a client in the Wadeville area in Joburg, just outside Johannesburg, and 20 of these EMIs descended on their site with 24 hours notice. All with their clipboards out, checking, inspecting, interrupting operations, but also looking very deeply. These are qualified environmental scientists coming and asking a lot of difficult questions. This is the number of prosecutions and cases. So dockets registered, number of admission of guilt, fines issued. I mean, these are large numbers. Number of criminal dockets handed over to the NPA, reduced from 434 to 326. These are all just environmental issues, right? Total number of arrests made from 787 in 2019-20 to 585. Obviously, this is all, the reduced numbers is all largely as a result of lockdown. It'd be interesting to see what the new numbers are after they start picking up. And the number of acquittals and convictions. So 47 positive convictions, then to 16. So, enforcement is happening. We might not be hearing about it as much as we we'd want with the big ticket items. But, government is certainly keen to look like they're doing something. The number of facilities that were inspected, 5,000 inspections, right? Proactive inspections. 66, the majority, this is the big takeaway, the majority of these inspections were due to waste and pollution issues. All right, so from an EIL point of view, we're saying, well, now's the time. This is the right product to have to protect against, these thousands of inspections that are occurring. And this is an example of some of the cases that they list in this annual report. And it's literally hundreds of pages long. And I just wanted to show you, how much detail and transparency the department's going to name and shame, companies that you'll know about, and many of them might be your clients, that are under investigation. So what are our takeaways as iTOO? Where are we sitting with this, and what's the conclusion? So usually there's a history of non-compliance before an incident, which is why our risk-based underwriting is important. We take a lot of time, a lot of cost at iTOO to understand your client's operations and what they're doing to put things right. Climate change going to make things much worse. There's a poor culture of maintenance on non-critical equipment. Government is a lot more responsive than people give them credit for. There's a lot of money spent by companies regarding upgrades, monitoring, public relations, cleanup, all the things that go below, outside of the main fines and penalties. And that's where an EIL policy is really helpful. Generally, for these types of large mining claims, we're seeing total damages 60 to 150, total claims damages comprising 15 to 40 million. Ecological restoration, very important part of any policy. And the media often exaggerates things, but, to be honest, there's what the media say, what the companies, and somewhere in between is the actual truth. But in this case, both companies are very lucky not to lose operational licenses or directors being prosecuted criminally. But as I showed you, that seems to be changing in the Thungela case. Both companies were uninsured and a hit to the balance sheet. So shareholders not going to be happy. We actually spoke with one of the analysts we'll talk about now. If mining can't afford insurance now, when? This is the price, export price at Richards Bay coal terminals of coal leaving South Africa. Look at, we're at record high coal prices. It's a matter of time before mining companies has directors prosecuted, fined, and claimed against, and there are many other examples. So, we're doing a special drive on our mining policies at the moment. As Shelley said, we're the only underwriters who can do coal, and this is an important time because now's the right time for them to take out these types of policies, get comfortable with the cover, and start to optimize their environmental protections. According to a leading South African mining analyst, because Transnet can't supply enough trains, they can't produce too much coal, so they're bringing mining fleets closer to home, they're not firing workers and rather spending early on rehab. Cash rich means they spend on environmental. Cash poor means they do the bare minimum. So right now, mining companies are cash rich, and they are spending on their rehab proactively, which means they're going to get the best possible premiums that they could get now. So I think now is a very opportune moment for them to get quotes. In this example, Exara director liability insurance doubled because banks and insurers are walking away from covering them. Coal insurance and borrowing for coal companies is deeply difficult. Environmental action groups are pressurizing the banks. So coal producers will need to reserve cash and be on top of their ESG issues going forward. They have to consider the just transition away from fossil fuels into renewables. But the government is in a quandary, cannot shut these mines down because the workers rely on them. Therefore, where will they get funding from in the future? And then the investors investing in the coal companies have to publish their proxy voting, which becomes part of their public record, which means that investors, like all your pension funds, Coronation, Allen Gray, Investec, all these people have to start admitting, oh, yes, we're investing in Tungela, and then they get it in the neck from their shareholders. So more and more investors are going to be pulling out, especially of coal. So it's very difficult for these coal miners to start raising funds. And we at iTOO have a solution that we would like to propose on how we think we can contribute to helping coal miners shut down responsibly and manage their environmental liabilities, because coal mining isn't going away. It's going to take us 5 to 10 years to really bring on renewables mainstream into South Africa. Currently, we're sitting at 15% of our electricity coming from renewables. Coal prices have been the highest that they've ever been. India and China demanding coal, especially with the energy crunch as a result of Ukraine. So coal prices are not going to come down. We're stuck with coal mining for the next 10 to 20 years anyway in South Africa to meet our base load requirements. So let's make the best use of a bad bargain. We've got to help these coal miners manage their mines responsibly to avoid the types of pollution disasters that we've just spoken about. So I'm asking you as the broker community, help us to help them to do the right thing. We haven't received a single inquiry yet or a proposal form for a coal mining operation since these last 2 disasters happened. I don't know why, but we are here and we are ready to assist. And I wanted to, and thank you for your time today in joining me to show you the opportunity and the need at the moment. So where does our solution come in quickly? A mine needs 3 types of enviro covers as far as we're concerned. At the operational phase, as you can see, right now, with these types of operational mines like Zululand Anthracite, the environmental liability is an ongoing issue prior to closure, right? When reaching closure, when you run out of coal, then you need 2 types of environmental insurance or types of insurance. You need a financial guarantee and you need the continued environmental liability cover, because your third-party risks to environmental pollution offsite don't suddenly disappear. You've still got the same tailings dams and discard stumps and open pit and acid mine drainage and return water dams, etc. So these 3 need to work in tandem during the operational phase and at closure. The iTOO Mine Safe product is the only product I'm aware of on the continent that can offer a spanning of the operational phase and the closure phase for third-party lives. So we cover first-party sudden accidental and third-party sudden accidental and gradual events, whereas the financial guarantee is only for first-party planned on-site closure and rehabilitation. The other difference is that for our policy, you only pay the premium, whereas for the financial guarantee, the client has to self-capitalize that money. So they've got to put away 100 million, 200 million. Hluhluwe at Exxaro, for example, has a financial guarantee of 3.2 billion rand. You remember the whole Optimum Gupta scandal? That was a 3 billion rand financial provision there. So there's a lot of cash being put away. We need to caveat this, obviously, that this is on a case-by-case application basis. So we've been advised that, and we have some interesting precedents that we could share with you on applications made to the authorities on behalf of our clients to get them to amend their insurance structure. There's no risk to the insured really, because they're just applying for the financial provision. Their mining rehab guarantee quantums go up and down every year anyway. So the DMRE is used to receiving applications with changing amounts, and I'll show you why that's important. In many respects, these mines can do away with their GL cover and place all their public liability, almost all of it, into the EIL cover. I mean, what are the other public liabilities associated with mining? You know, slips and trips on site. Well, almost everybody on site anyway is a contractor if they're not an employee, so they should have their own contractors insurance. Product liability can be peeled out separately, and the only public liability that isn't then associated with pollution such as rockfall and blasts and tremors, earth tremors, etc., resulting in building instability can be quoted on separately. So we think that this is a much more cost-effective solution for mines, and we can also cover the consequential damages from latent defects of poor rehab. But the main solution that I wanted to show you in the remaining minutes is how our proposal can free up to anywhere between 5 to 20% of financial provisions for closure. Give that, the mine then gets that money back, the capital that they've been putting away, and returns it back into working capital. Their working capital, you know, any CFO at any mining company is hoping to get 25 to 30% return on equity. Whereas at best, you can get money market returns on any captive or financial provision. So the difference in the return on equity substitutes the lack of funding that mines won't be able to get any more from their banks. And how that works, as we heard from that analyst, increasingly difficult for coal miners to raise capital. So just a quick note here, our limit for indemnity for coal, our treaty is still small at 25 as we grow capacity. That'll grow for others outside of coal, 75 million each and every, and 150 million in the ag. So just briefly to show you how this intersects. In a typical mine, we see two types of risks. There's a planned liability, which is your probability is 1, it's first party on site, and the EPL should be certain. No one disputes that a tailing dam exists. This is the acreage, surface area of the tailings dam. This is how much it's going to cost to revegetate it. And for that, a mine closure guarantee is the correct tool. But for the unplanned liabilities, right, where it's third party off-site, the probability is less than 1, the estimated probable loss is uncertain, the risk may never materialize. There's no point in tying up rare capital into a mine closure guarantee and getting money market returns when the risk might not materialize. Rather, place it in the right structure of policy with the right insuring clauses covering all the consequential damages. And this is where our mine safe policy steps in, both during operational phase as well as for closure. And the financial implications for the clients are as follows.
James, sorry, I just want to let you know that it's 10:10 and there's still a few questions, so we can just start wrapping up. Thank you.
So from a mine closure guarantee point of view, one's got to self-capitalize all of these elements, even including the potential third-party lives. But there's still exposure. One remains uncovered during that period and in a post-closure environment for the third-party lives. Rather, if we could take that portion of the mining rehab guarantee and move that into an EIL cover during operational phase, you are then covered under a more efficient use of capital arrangement for the water risks, AMD, tailings, dust, etc. that we spoke about earlier. So this is the type of scenario that we're looking at, where there is a hybrid solution between a mine closure guarantee and iTOO's mine safe policy during both the operational phase and during rehab and post-closure. So the premiums on your mine closure guarantee are equivalent in terms of a rate on line to the EIL covered during the operational phase. And what we're planning on designing is through no claims, paybacks, etc., building up a reservoir, a kitty, to cover for a walkaway scenario post-closure, even in the case of default, where the EIL cover remains in place during rehab and post-closure. So we invite coal mining companies in particular, and other mining companies in general, to please partner with iTOO to help liberate capital in their balance sheets and approach the department to obtain flexible hybrid solutions in terms of how they manage their environmental lives. And the financial implications are clear. Just a very simple financial model, I can take this through in detail if you want, based on a number of assumptions up front. You can see that for 100 million total financial provision with a mining rehab guarantee only, this is going to cost your average mining company about 63 million rand over a 10-year life of mine. If they move to a hybrid solution, using our product as well as the mining rehab guarantee, using our product for only 20%, so 20 million of the 100 million is for water, dust, tailings, dams, etc., acid mine drainage. That situation changes where they actually pay for their own mining rehab by freeing up to 20% of their working of their mining rehab guarantee back into working capital. So it's a far more lucrative position, a far more financially sustainable position for the mines, and they get the right cover to be able to respond to those types of incidents for third-party claims, etc. There's a similar development on the oil and gas side. This is not just about mining. This is also about oil and gas who are subject to the same regulations. They don't have to apply to the Mineral Resources Department. They apply to NERSA, the same people that set the price of your fuel and your petrol. And they have a similar situation whereby, let's say you're running a big fuel depot or a big factory or a big processing facility or a refinery, right? So what the regulations there, either by contract, by lease agreement, or by the MPRDA, the Minerals Petroleum Resources Development Act, require a closure plan for even these oil and gas installations. And what we've designed is again, a hybrid set of policies whereby there's a walkaway scenario for the tenant, for the operator, a combination of our insurance structures so that they don't have to self-capitalize. We have a client at the moment who's currently got an application with NERSA saving 150 million rand across their 9 fuel depots in and around Durban area. We can pay for up to 2 discoveries post-vacation of the site. Gradual pollution on site, first party. It's the first time it's ever been done in the industry. If the landlord discovers, or the next tenant or the next property developer discovers pollution on site, all of these things can be covered through our proposals. And again, whereas before it would have cost the client 58 million for a 10-year financial provision, now they're making money by liberating this capital. So all in all, we're very optimistic that this is how environmental insurance should be crafting financial engineering solutions for your clients to help them access their capital, but also reduce their risk and exposures during operation and closure. Thank you so very much for your time. I see that there's a number of questions.
James, if I can just jot in here, Giselle has had her hand up from the very beginning, so I'm going to allow her to talk to ask her question. Giselle, the mic is yours. Okay, Giselle doesn't seem to be available. Okay, I'm going to start with Reggie. Reggie said, is there a limit on the first party cover? And does the cover remedial work?
Yeah. The cover covers remedial work, not betterments, upgrades, or to the actual plant and equipment, but all the affected land, soil, groundwater, etc., will be remediated as part of the claim.
Great. Nolene Tinran said that she was quite impressed with the premium that you presented in respect of the covers that were given. Samsanka turned around and asked, there's a lot of emphasis on the ESG. How can the clients in the mining sector in particular ensure economic sustainability and maintain risk appetite from the reinsurers?
Sure. That's a big question. I might need to unpack a little bit more to find out what she's referring to. But in the end, if mining companies have a spill with climate change, etc., is looking all the more likely. they're going to be under increased pressure to continue operating, which means all those jobs are at stake, which means the financial sustainability of the whole industry could be brought into question. And we think that insurance plays an important role in keeping those jobs alive. So we think it's part of the ESG being a responsible corporate citizen is upgrading your site, doing the right maintenance and checking, but then taking out insurance for the what-if scenarios that things are going to go wrong. And we're seeing that those number of cases are increasing.
Absolutely. Nolene asked another question. She said, do you believe that they were aware of the illegal miners, and did they even report them to the authorities prior to the event happening?
No, my personal take is that this is a little bit of an excuse for a poor maintenance program.
So Graham Kelly responded and said, I bet they were aware of the illegal miners, poor management and no concern for the environment.
There we go.
Stephanie turned around and asked, shame, Stephanie also had her hand up for a very long time. Together is my client at Marsh. I'd like to have a conversation with you afterwards. So James, I'll get you in touch with her. Peter Dexter turned around and said, are the departments allowing mining companies to access their mining rehabilitation guarantees? I've heard that these have been dipped into.
Only if it's part of the rehab. So what we're seeing now is with the Transnet decreased capabilities, the guys are slowing down their operations and they're starting their rehab now, which will reduce any premiums for any policies that they take out. So now is a good time to sell these policies, get them introduced. My experience was really this. During lockdown, nobody wanted to buy new covers because it was lockdown, life was uncertain, cyber was the flavor of the day, and the assets program was an incredibly hard market. And there was no appetite to buy new products. Everybody told me, I'll come back at the next renewal cycle, and then renewal was too busy, and then come back out of cycle. So it got bumped down the road. But I think now, post-lockdown, the load shedding seems to have been resolving itself. I think, and now the commodity cycle is the prices are so high that these mining companies are in the most cash-rich position that they're in. Now's the time to be recognized for them doing the right things and to take out these policies and get them onto their insurance program.
Okay. Nolene said, so then who looks after those old mines when they're closed? Again, is this out of sight, out of mind?
This is the big issue. This is the legacy challenge that unfortunately we can't respond to either. It sits with government. So for liquidated mines, old closed mines, those responsibilities sit with government. Unfortunately, that's a different discussion.
Sharon wants to know, what can coal miners do regarding the damage caused by illegal miners, especially in the East Rand, the Zamazamas?
Take out the right insurance would be a good start because you're going to be liable. That's your property. Anybody who owns, controls, or manages any operation which may cause pollution is criminally liable, and is liable for what? Emergency response, cleanup, and compensation to affected parties. It's a long court case to prove that it wasn't yours, it was illegal miners that got onto your site without you having the necessary securities in place. So the first respondent will definitely be the mining company. And for that, we think that insurance plays an important role.
Okay, Colleen Creswell turned around and said, I think we could spend the entire day on this topic. Really, really informative. Reggie turned around and asked, do you provide first-party cover for service stations for gradual pollution?
First party, no. Every filling station in this country, I can tell you now, because we have R1 million worth of equipment of vapor probe. So we go, before we do an old filling station, we drill a 1-inch core sample through the cement, very, very discreet. Nobody even knows we're there. Obviously, the landowners do. Drill down, we don't stop operations. We drill down, we put this probe in, and it tells us instantly what volatile organic compounds are sitting trapped under the hard standing. And every filling station in this country has gradual pollution. Maybe I can say that again. Every filling station in this country has gradual pollution. There's slips and trips, there's small leaks, there's overspills, etc. So unfortunately, we have to eliminate that from our insuring clauses. But we cover first party sudden and accidental, and third party gradual and sudden accidental. And the gradual for the third party has no retroactive date. We've actually just resolved this morning with our claims committee that we are underwriting a filling station which had a known spill incident. It was cleaned up by Shell in 2013, from 2013 to 2017, and the new owners are asking us, will you pay for a claim against that old spill back then that has been rehabilitated? And we know spread off site, but has been cleaned up. And the answer is a firm yes.
Okay. Mandy Wheatman has asked, could a clay quarry for brick manufacturing possibly fall within the scope of a mining policy, your mindset policy?
Yeah, clay mining definitely does. Clay mining probably, and here we're going to be dead honest, we're not going to sell premium just for the sake of it. We're going to give you the right advice as well. Clay mining probably doesn't need a high EIL cover because clay is by nature very inert. It retains water, it seals up any cracks in its own lining. In fact, all the best landfills in the country have been built atop clay liners because they act as a natural retardant of any pollution spreading. So clay is one of the commodities that probably doesn't need EIL cover, to be honest.
Okay, thank you. Bianca asked, can she get a recording of the webinars? Absolutely, Bianca. They are on our YouTube channel. We will give you access to the YouTube sighting once it's uploaded. It normally takes about 3 to 4 days. Caroline said, thanks for an awesome session. Everyone's saying thank you so much for the time and sharing this with us. I'm just trying to see if there's any other ones. I think James, what came out of this is that the topic is very interesting and an hour is not enough time. And maybe it's to be split into 2 different ones. Maybe the gas and oils is another session that we can bring in.
Yeah. Watch the space. We're having some very interesting developments. We're setting, maybe I could blow our trumpet in the last 30 seconds. The iTOO environmental department has developed 3 or 4 world firsts, which I can maybe speak about. This is one of them, the restructuring of mining rehab guarantee balance sheets. The oil and gas co is another one. So we're doing some very interesting product innovation that, according to our reinsurers, Swiss Re, this is the first time these things are being done in the world. So please take advantage of this brokers and let's share these benefits with your clients.